Good evening, afternoon, night, morning, whenever you find a way to watch, listen to this podcast. It is me, Omar Ashan Bora, the Burger Popper, joining for another week in our hardware preview, in our hardware podcast with Jackson. I can't believe it's week 7 already. As we speak right now, Liberty's playing FIU, have that playing in the background for Tuesday night football, and this is the first of either 55 or 56 straight days where there is a football game, either professional or college. So the most wonderful time of the year is kicked off, and the season's chugging along. But man, what a wild week it was, Jackson. What do you say?
Yeah, just a couple upsets happening, right? In all levels of football. We're not only talking Vanderbilt, Alabama. Arguably as interesting to watch was Weber State, with the upset also. No, there was a ton of upsets at all levels of football. It was a blast to watch. And this is what we get for saying it's maybe a little bit of a weaker slate and we're finding out about teams. No, no, it's not. Whenever it's not a top heavy slate or there isn't the marquee matchups that you're really expecting. There's only one top 25 matchup in all of college football. That was, one of the more boring games of the weekend. And no, what a great weekend. Just reminds us of how beautiful and unpredictable this sport is.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, yeah, like you mentioned, the upsets not just at the highest level of college football, but at the FCS level as well. With of course a little bit of Big Sky chaos, and this week the Big Sky has a game on ESPN, so that definitely a lot of momentum building for arguably the strongest conference in the FCS right now. So just a great week. So I will start with our players of the week. So starting off with offensive player of the week, Jackson, who is your offensive player of the week for week 6?
Yeah, so from week 6, who really stood out to me on offense was Anthony Hankerson. He's a running back from Oregon State. Makes up half of the duo running back system that the Beavers run. Saturday against Colorado State, he had the game-winning touchdown with the 25-yard run on the first play of double overtime. But there's a little bit more to the story. So the running back that he split carries with, Jam Griffin, went down with a pretty gruesome knee injury about halfway through the game. Afterward, he had a pretty emotional presser just talking about how he felt like he really found his purpose after Jam gave a message to Anthony, just saying that he needed Anthony to go out and make plays for him since he couldn't. He obviously did that with this game-winning touchdown and about 130 all-purpose yards all in. While that extra bit of motivation helped, this isn't the first time he's had an excellent game either. In fact, it's pretty much been the norm for him. He has two rushing touchdowns in four of his last five games, despite splitting carries almost exactly evenly so far in the season. I'm not a physician, but I can tell you that crutches are never a good sign. So I don't believe there's a firm timetable for Jam's return. So Anthony Hinkerson quickly might have to become the face of the sixth best total rushing offense in the FBS. So excited to see how Oregon State continues to use him at a more high volume pace.
Yeah, I mean, Hankerson just shows the amount of backfield depth that has really marked Oregon State, has really kind of been their huge I guess their biggest weapon the past few seasons, starting way back in 2021 when they made their first bowl game in a while. You had BJ Baylor leading the charge, and of course the past couple years Damian Martinez was a great back before heading to Miami. So that's one thing you know for sure, that Oregon State's going to run the ball. They're going to run the ball down your throat and play a physical game. But it almost wasn't enough against Colorado State. It was a really competitive game, and that was almost another upset that we saw on the CW. But
Man, who knew the CW would have such great college football someday, right? If you had told us that 5 years ago, I don't think anyone would believe you.
I mean, from the jump, I was a believer in the CW in these CW games. Just gonna put that out there. Um, but going on to my offense for the week, I'm also picking a running back, but for a different reason. I'm picking Navy's Eli Heidenreich, who became the first Naval Academy player ever to run for 100 yards and receive for 100 yards. Of course, you hear a Naval Academy back running for 100 yards, you don't really bat an eye, but receiving for 100 yards with this new millennial wing tee under Drew Cronick is kind of one of college football's best stories early in the season. It's catching a lot of people's attention, which we'll talk about later on. in detail. But a lot of the tension's going to Blake Horvath, but Eli Heidenreich was able to make explosive plays and really show, I guess, the evolution of the slot back position at Navy, where it's always been an explosive position in the Navy offense when they ran the triple option under Paul Johnson and Kenyon Matalolo, but that was mostly in I guess efficient in those efficient option pitch plays where sometimes they would burst out and sometimes in the pass game. But Heidenreich is a proven slot receiver. I mean, honestly, I think he can start in the slot for a lot of programs in the FBS, excuse me, in the FBS right now in a spread scheme. He's just that good of a receiver, and of course, running the ball too. So a historic day for Navy for Eli Heidenreich, and just a great game in general, and that's why he gets my Player of the Week nod in Navy's 34-7 win over the Air Force Academy. Their first win at the Air Force Academy since 2012 and the largest win in the series since 1978 for the midshipmen. And that 1978 team ended up going to the Holiday Bowl. That's not a possibility for Navy, but could be a sign of bigger things to come.
And I don't remember saying it on the podcast thus far in the season, but what do I almost always say about running backs?
You can't catch, you can't play. It's been the
Exactly.
thing.
The old MJD quote, man. So absolutely. And indeed he can play if he has a hundred in each category. So no, love to see that, especially from a service academy offense. I mean, it's just what a world we live in now. But and who would have thought in the NIL era of all times too that this would really be when service academy offenses are excelling. So didn't see it coming. But for my defensive player of the week, I'm gonna go with Finn Claypool. He's an edge rusher from Drake. First of all, you could pick almost anyone on that Drake defensive squad for defensive player of the week. They held Valpo in the -4 rushing yards on 32 attempts, which is just ludicrous. But Finn Claypool specifically had 8 tackles, three and a half of them for tackles for losses, and two and a half of those for sacks. In my opinion, there's really not a position that more naturally translates than the edge. It's just a number that you are a position where you see production translate, right? And so you want to pay attention to edge rushers in all levels of college football. This was a great performance specifically, but he was also the highest graded FCS edge rusher all last year. For context, second on that list from last year was Stephen Parker. He transferred to Texas State. He now leads Texas State in tackles for loss, and Texas State has the fourth most tackles for loss in the country. So Finn Claypool has been producing for a long time. Good to see him have a great performance against, what was probably a pretty bad Valpo offense, but it wasn't nobody stopping them out there. So last year Finn was a Buck Buchanan finalist. Hopefully we can maybe even see him take the award this year. So
Yeah, for Finn Claypool to take the award would be a huge statement for non-scholarship football, especially in the Pioneer Football League, because they're always kind of overlooked. Like those schools make it very clear that they are football, I mean, that they're basketball schools, which is the reason why that they have non-scholarship football programs. It drives up enrollment and it keeps their main sport, basketball, afloat and at the Division 1 level, earning the school money. But Drake is just they've had a great last 2 years. Last year made their first appearance in the FCS playoffs, and it really shows the parity that's been in the league ever since San Diego took a step back in that conference. And now you have Davidson had their run. Now it's Drake. And you just have, I mean, just good parity and just different programs making the playoffs now. So it's good to see. But Finn Claypool at Drake, I kind of wonder too. I don't want to say it, but maybe like a transfer. I don't know if he'll be a transfer portal situation, but I think with the situation he's in, being a non-scholarship player, he might just stay there at Drake and just ride it out. But it's great to see Drake getting some attention, and they might just go back to back in the Pioneer Football League again. They had an exciting win against San Diego a couple weeks ago. Game-winning field goals, time expired. Just love to see it.
But to your point, as far as maybe going into transfer portal, we saw, with Stephen Parker going to Texas State, we saw like similar levels of talent transfer to obviously a scholarship program and instantly have production, right? So
Yeah.
it's not like he wouldn't. I can't imagine that there's not a desire for him to transfer elsewhere. It's just a matter of, what his individual situation is. I have no idea what it is for Finn, but There definitely would be the market out there for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Drake, that's just always been the way that they have been. Just a strong defense. And I mean, never count out non-scholarship players because, of course, Josh Johnson, San Diego alum, San Diego Toreros alum, was part of a non-scholarship program. And he is still in the league after I think this is his 17th season in the league, just trucking along, staying in the league. And he's Lamar Jackson's backup now. So, it's, you can never count out the non-scholarship guys in terms of talent, especially whether it be the Ivy League or it be the Pioneer League or Division Three. So that being said, speaking of defense, my defensive player of the week, I have Skylar Murray, not Kyler Murray, Skylar Murray for Virginia University Lynchburg, and they did not win their game against Texas Southern, but they put out a valiant effort. For those not aware, Virginia University Lynchburg is a non-affiliated program. They're not in the NCAA, they're not in the NAIA, but I think they're in the National Christian Collegiate Athletic Association, the NCCAA, and they play a bunch of Division One schools. And frankly, they get blown out a lot, but they collect a check that keeps a very small school. I think enrollment's only in the 300s. That keeps that school afloat, really. But they were really competitive against Texas Southern this week, only losing 28-10 to the Tigers. That was Virginia University Lynchburg's closest game against a Division One opponent since 2022 when they lost to Presbyterian by one score. In that game, Skylar Murray had 15 tackles for the Dragons. Just a great performance all over the field on defense. And I just want to give a shout out to Skylar Murray and Virginia University Lynchburg because it's a tough situation out there, but it's got to be good for guys like that to have great games against Division One competition and potentially show out for some pro scouts potentially because a lot of NFL teams, all NFL teams scout FBS schools. So the SWAC is a great hotbed for talent. So maybe some pro scouts saw Murray play for Virginia University Lynchburg, and maybe bigger things could be in his future. But shout out to Skylar Murray and the Dragons. Hopefully they win a couple this year or upset a couple FBS teams or Division two teams this year.
Yeah, I was just looking at his profile. It looks like he's a transfer from Independence. And just seeing on some of the stuff like retweeted, he's had like double digit tackles up there a few times this year, I believe. So no, that's awesome to see.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, sooner or later, one of these days, you're gonna catch one of these Division One schools sleeping. I believe it, and I just can't wait for the day that it happens, really. So shout out to
That's
the
gonna be
Dragons
great.
once again.
What the more talented football team doesn't always win. I we've never seen examples from the of that. Certainly not last week. So yeah, just have to catch the right team at the right time. So for my HBCU player of the week, I'm gonna go with Justin Smith Brown, the wide receiver from South Carolina State, and a 22-20 win over Tennessee Tech. He had 4 receptions for 126 yards and 2 touchdowns. Just a Randy Moss type stat line, if you know that meme. But so far on the season, he's averaging 15 yards of reception. He's the second overall leading receiver on the team with 332 yards on the year. These were actually his first 2 scoring touchdowns on the year. Hopefully, we see a little bit more consistent action out of him. But awesome. Anytime you put up single digit receptions and multiple touchdowns, it deserves to be recognized. So, Justin Smith Brown.
But Justin Smith Brown, like South Carolina State is in a rebuild, right? With Buddy Pugh, their longtime coach, legendary longtime coach. I hope he makes the College Football Hall of Fame. I'm not sure if his win percentage fits the criteria, but he was at South Carolina State for a long time, led some great teams, and he beat Coach Deion Sanders in the Celebration Bowl in 2021. Which, speaking of that Celebration Bowl, Shaq Davis wowed the nation at wide receiver in that game, and he went to the East West Shrine Bowl as well. So it's good to see that the pedigree of great wide receivers is continuing out there in Spartanburg, in Orangeburg, South Carolina, with his performance against Tennessee Tech, and just a great performance. I mean, it was just a great game for the MEAC. really beating a team from the Ohio Valley Conference in a week where Southern, front runner in a SWAC West, got blown out by a Southland school. So just a great week for the MEAC and sort of that arms race that you see behind or between the two conferences, not just during the Celebration Bowl and MEAC SWAC Challenge. So just a great performance. And again, like we're not even into the MEAC conference season. Every team's in it. Like every team has had their moments to shine. So it may not be North Carolina Central's race to run away with in the MEAC.
No, it's not. It's been a competitive league so far this year, and yeah, we're definitely not going to see like was it back to back Celebration Bowl championships when they faced Dion? I can't remember,
It
but it
was
was
not, or yeah, I don't think so. I don't think any team's gone back to back since all North Carolina A&T back in like 2019 and 2018. Yeah, I don't think any team's gone back to back.
it's been a minute, but it's definitely not going to be top heavy with them at the
No.
top at least. So
Yeah, I mean, you only
yeah,
got 6 teams, so there's not much of a
yeah.
top to, there's not much of a top in that
Hey,
conference.
that's very fair. Um, awesome. Well, we will go ahead and
Oh,
go.
I still got my HBC
Oh
better
my
than you.
gosh, dude. Yeah, I'm sorry. My bad.
All
Yes.
good, all good. So I'm gonna go with Malcolm Mays, the say hey kid, say hey Malcolm Mays for Hampton, the quarterback for Hampton, who had an amazing game out there in that epic in Armstrong, as in Armstrong Stadium, where Hampton took Rhode Island to triple overtime and almost beat the Rhode Island Rams, the top 20 ranked Rhode Island Rams now. But Mays was impressive, taking over for Chris Zealous, who had an impressive year last year, but Mays had 253 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions, and 37 rushing yards and another touchdown. Now, Hampton has struggled at times in their transition to the Coastal, not Colonial Athletic Association. This was encouraging, though. This kind of showed that Hampton might be a year away. They might contend. They might play spoiler a couple weeks in this season for the Coastal Athletic Association. But man, what a performance in that epic game against Rhode Island. But Mays is a senior. You could probably see him in Nollins in the HBCU Legacy Bowl, or possibly in a bigger All-Star game if he continues to have success. The Hula Bowl also picks up a lot of FCS quarterbacks on their rosters. In fact, coming out or not out of the CAA, in fact, the Big South, and which is now a CAA team, Monmouth, Kenji Bahar, the great Houston Gamblers quarterback of old. So Malcolm Mays, the say hey kid, just having had a great game, and honestly, I think he might stay at quarterback for the Pirates for the I guess in the near future.
And I know that school given height weight numbers are sometimes inflated, but he's listed at 6'5", 195. He can't be a fun guy to tackle. I have no idea as far as if he's a more like scrambling quarterback or anything like that, but man, that does not sound that's not a height and weight that you see, on every team like you do in the Power Four, right? At that level of football. So um no, that's awesome to see. Great for him. I think it was I'm looking at it now. He was the HBCU player of the week listed by I can't see who named him that.
Was it box to row? Because I know that they're a comment selector.
HBCU plus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Well, we will go ahead and go into our games of the week that we're looking forward to watching.
Oh,
Uh
but first, Jackson, first, let's review the week before. So a couple questions about, I guess, about the Heisman race in terms of the narrative. So first off, do you think this is Ashton Genty's Heisman to lose at this point?
I think if he keeps putting up these numbers, then absolutely. Now if it kind of if it's kind of tamed a little bit, where maybe he has a 2 touchdown rushing game or like a 200-yard game here and then you know make make him beat the whoever the quarterback is on the best team probably but no at this level of production if he finds a way to keep this up yeah man, like there's no way you cannot give it to him after this. Now, if you are an Ashen Jeanty enthusiast, what you need to be rooting for is for Cam Ward and guys like that to just not perform as well, right? And I hate pulling against guys, but it's like, Cameron Ward is going to be the name that until Miami is knocked off, which I think it will find them at some point. A loss will find them at some point, I think. But until Cam Ward is knocked off, that is going to be the casual fan, the quarterback enthusiast, the college football fans that don't know what the Kibby Dome is, right? Like that sort of fan. That's who they will be talking about until they're knocked off.
Yeah, I kind of want to push back a bit on the whole on Cam Ward's candidacy because even with Cam Ward, I mean, his Heisman moment happened. Well, then again, Boise State played. They typically play a lot of later games, but his Heisman moment happened against Cal, in a game where a lot of the country was asleep. Really, ratings might have been strong since it was a college game day game, but even then, like you say, like a loss might find Miami in the near future. And honestly, too, I don't think much of the country's happy with how the refs have missed calls in some big moments or made controversial calls in some big moments in the last 2 weeks against Virginia Tech with the Hail Mary, and then this past week with a targeting on Fernando Mendoza. So, and it could be argued that Fernando Mendoza outplayed Cam Ward. So, with that being said, I think Ashton Genty's stats are just so outrageous right now that the casual fan is taking note. Right, he's starting to take over Twitter as the guy that is on pace to break Barry Sanders' record, which I think he can this year. I honestly think he will break Barry Sanders' record. So I definitely think that he is the casual fans pick, but it's not just the casual fans. I think it's the writers too. I think the writers love this movement for Jeanty, where he's a guy that could have played at a power conference school, was offered the money, but stayed at Boise State. And I think a lot of writers, I will tug at the heartstrings of a lot of writers and have them vote for Jeanty just with the stats he's putting up and everything too. Because I mean, it's about the storyline too with the Heisman. It's a popularity contest. And speaking of popularity, Boise State has a big Black Friday game on CBS that probably most of the country is going to be watching to see Ashton Jeanty perform against a power conference school or a brand name school like Oregon State. So I think the path's there for Jeanty, even if they lose a game, honestly. But I don't really see them losing a game the rest of the year. So I think Jeanty's the favorite. I really do think it's his award to lose, but it is only October 8th right now.
Yeah, like you said, it is only October 8th. I really hope Gentio, I mean, he is the most deserving, right? So I hope he wins it. Assuming that he keeps a similar level of production. It doesn't have to be just, the ridiculous numbers he's putting up now every week. But I do want to ask you because we had this conversation last season on hardware, and I think he's good enough where it warrants a conversation, at least, even if he isn't gonna be a finalist. Travis Hunter, man. Like no one else is doing what he's doing. And everyone's sick about talking about Colorado. I don't remember the last time we talked about Colorado on hardware, but just because we don't necessarily like focusing on his team doesn't mean that we shouldn't respect him as a player, right? Because he's just phenomenal at what he's doing. Where does he rank on your short list right now?
So for me, I'm gonna rank Travis Hunter. Honestly, I'd say either two or three, right? So for me, Travis Hunter's two or three because, like you said, no one's doing what he's doing, right? Everyone loves a two-way player, and Colorado right now is doing great. I think the Big 12 schedule is going to catch up to them. I think they'll make a bowl this year, but I also think that the Pac-12 schedule, the Big 12 schedule is going to catch up to them, and they'll have a less impressive record. But everyone loves a two-way player, and I kind of think back to the last two-way player that was in New York for the Heisman ceremony, Jabril Peppers, who is in the news for some less than savory events that happened. But Jabril Peppers had on offense, he didn't have an amazing year, but he made big plays on offense occasionally. And on defense, he was a leader of a Michigan team that almost made the playoff. So he's number two or three for me. I think for now, I think if we're talking about path to potential, I honestly think that number two is either Blake Horvath or Bryson Daly. Swap them, call me biased, but they both have nationally televised games against Notre Dame that could shape the college football race. They are not just running the ball on run heavy offenses, but they're throwing the ball at amazing clips, honestly. And it's also that part too, where it's like, I really feel like the voting this year is going to take a turn because we have an outstanding running back, we have a two-way player, and the usual suspects. Everyone thought Carson Beck, right? Carson Beck got outshined by Jalen Milroe. But guess what? Milroe got outplayed by Diego Pavia. So and then Diego Pavia dropped a game against Georgia State. So it's like, I really think this is one of the most open Heisman races that we have, at least out of October. Because I mean, there's just so much paths you can take for who is exactly going to be in New York.
Yeah, there are a lot of like really solid names out there, right? Like there's not anyone that is consistently being talked about that I'll like, roll my eyes if he wins it, right? So it's like there's lots of good talent out there. Ashton Jeanty, I think, is at the top. Dude, I think you're right. I think Travis Hunter might actually be I may put him just a little bit above Cam Ward. And then Cam Ward at three, and then after that, it kind of gets a little bit muddy. We have like three, if any of those three won it, I wouldn't really be upset about it, right? Because Cam Ward has looked like the best quarterback, and I understand when it goes to the best quarterback, it's hard to argue with. It's the hardest position in sports. And then Travis Hunter, two-way player, no one's doing what he's doing. It's really historic. A lot of the things he's accomplishing, as far as like just even we have seen two-way guys, but just not at the volume that he's seeing, right? It's ridiculous. He's playing like 96% of snaps or something insane. And then Ashton Jeanty is just, he's, still running for touchdowns on Tuesday night. So, um, yeah, absolutely, man.
I
Um,
also think too, just before we go to the next high topic, I also think too that a guy like Curtis Rourke could also slide up in the Heisman because of the whole underdog slant, where Indiana has Michigan later this year, and I think they have Ohio State. I'll check their schedule. But I've seen Curtis Rourke in some Twitter rankings, and of course, Twitter isn't, the Heisman voter base, but Rourke's had a great year. And Indiana right now is 6-0 for the first time, I want to say, since it was like 1967. He's like Rourke has definitely a path that Indiana continues to make their path to the 12-team playoff in their first year in the playoff. But he's definitely got a path with a game against Michigan and also a game against Ohio State, which honestly might be big noon kickoff, like I mean, when it's all said and done. So a guy like that. But even then, I don't think that many people are watching Indiana's games. So far for him to really rise up, and I can kind of say the same thing too about Eli Holstein from Pitt, because Pitt's had a great year. They're undefeated so far as well. They're 5-0, but I don't know if many people are taking Pitt seriously or watching their games really.
yeah, I just Googled their head coach, and yeah, he wins, man. So,
Yeah, that's a good one. I see what you did there. That is true. That is true. I mean, if you don't know Kurt Signetti, Google him. He wins. Um,
yes.
but speaking of underdog quarterbacks for our last kind of Heisman point, do you think Diego Pavia can be taken seriously in the Heisman race? Like I said before, of course, we all know that he beat Bama, but he also has that loss to Georgia State in his on his resume, even though it was not his fault at all. He has not thrown a single interception all season. He's ran the ball very tough this year, averaging less than 4 yards a carry, but he has over 300 rushing yards. I guess what do you think of Diego Pavia's Heisman candidacy out of Vanderbilt, no less?
So candidacy, I don't love it right now, but as far as path to the Heisman, which is, you have to have a path. That's Ashton Genty's question. That's, half of these guys, the question is, do they have a path? Dude, he has the most clear-cut path maybe in college football. He already beat Bama, and he has Georgia and Texas down the road too. So Vandy has the chance to do some amazing things. What do I think that they're going to do it? Probably not, right? Let's be real. But as far as like path, he's got, 1/3 of the battle knocked out. I don't care who he loses to. If he finds a way to beat those three, then he'll be fine. Um, so yeah, no, I don't think we're gonna be talking about, Diego in a month from now when we're talking about the Heisman, but it's gonna definitely going to go down as a historic moment, the best win in Vanderbilt history by far. Probably what we think of when we look back in, 20, 30 years on the 2024 season. That's probably going to be the first thing that comes to people's minds. If it's not, then I can't wait for what's next. But uh, yeah, he has a clear path, but I don't think he's gonna be a Heisman candidate.
Yeah, doing some quick research on past Vanderbilt Heisman candidates. The only one I can find is Carl Hinkle, who finished, I think, seventh in the Heisman voting in 1937. So that's the only person I can find for Vanderbilt that has had any Heisman
Jay
candidacy in that
Cutler wasn't
program's long
on there?
history. Jay Cutler was not in the
Really?
top 10. He was not in the top 10.
That
So
surprises me.
yeah, not even Jay Cutler. So yeah, so it definitely is unprecedented if he were to get votes. The path definitely is there, but I just don't know. Like I don't think Vanderbilt's a bad team. I just don't think that they'll beat Georgia and Texas all in the same year. So I also think this race too. Speaking of Texas, I think this race benefits from Quinn Ewers being hurt because if Texas is undefeated,
Yeah,
like Quinn
you're
Ewers missed
right.
two starts, so that definitely
You're
something we're
absolutely
overlooking.
right.
So I think with that, oh, also, sorry, I forgot one last thing. So just really quick, do you think Blake Horvath on CBS, no less, helped his Heisman candidacy with a 100 game on CBS in front of a pretty vast national audience. The noon slate was really lackluster. I mean, you had Texas A&M blow out Missouri, you had UCLA or Penn State blow out UCLA. So really, like the best game on network TV, or I mean, the best game on network TV was a Penn State UCLA game, despite the score. Or sorry, scratch that. Wake Forest, NC State on the CW, but the CW's viewership numbers haven't been amazing. So I guess do you think the audience that Horvath and Navy got helps his candidacy because he made some beautiful throws in that game.
Louisville SMU was in that window, right? Am I remembering right?
I'm talking network TV because of course
Okay.
cable lags behind the network TV viewing.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah, it certainly helps. I mean, it didn't hurt, right? So it certainly helped. It's just my thing is with the group of five, man, there's only for legitimate Heisman talk, there's only room for one candidate, in my opinion, and that's Ashton Jeanty by a landslide. So I hate to sound like, a little bit of like I mean, it's a very realist point of view, and I hate to say it. That's one of the reasons we do this show is to bring a lot of love to these group of five guys and FCS guys and their awards. But no, in my opinion, I just don't think there's room for more than one guy for us to talk about. It's going to be Ashton Jeanty until proven otherwise, and deservedly so.
All right, fair enough. I will continue to believe the contrary, especially when we got Bryson Daly leading the country in rushing touchdowns and Blake Horvath just having a great year for Navy as well. So we'll agree to disagree on that one, Jackson. I mean,
I
I
hope you're right, man. I hope I'm wrong on this one.
yeah, but I mean, I understand where you're coming from though, where there's only room for one candidate, right? And I mean, just like looking back, trying to think the years that did have a group of five candidate, I do think that there was only one, like Holt Brennan in 2007, he was the only one. Kellen Moore in 2010, I think in 2011, either one of those years, he was the only one. And then Jordan Lynch back in 2013. I don't think there was another group of five candidate along with Jordan Lynch that year. So I don't Northern Illinois. So I mean, I do see where you're coming from, and it is bad. It is based in fact, but I just hope you're wrong this year.
I hope so. I hope so.
All right, going on to our games of the week, Jackson. What is your first game of the week?
So my first game of the week to watch is actually on Friday night. As much as I love Ivy League Friday nights, I am gonna have to go with Utah at Arizona State. It's the late night Friday game on ESPN. I believe it's like a 10:15, 10:30 Eastern time kickoff. Arizona State is fascinating right now. They're 4-1 in a power conference, and they haven't received a single AP vote from last week. or from this week, I should say. Now, I don't know if it's just the lack of star power. For example, their leading receiver has only one 100-yard game. But just no one seems to be talking about Arizona State right now. Utah, on the other hand, just got punched in the face by Arizona before their bye in week 6. We don't really ever see teams go into Utah and win by multiple scores. I feel like it's a pretty tough place to play, but this was only their second such game since the 2020 season. Oregon last year's was the other one, if you remember right. So Utah is a team that's looked dominant. That's why they were ranked in the top 10 going into their loss. Arizona State has the same record in the same conference, and they didn't get a single vote. So I think we'll know a lot more about these teams after Friday. The fact that this game is at Arizona State makes it a lot more interesting to me. But yeah, I'm excited to see this one and uh see where these teams really land because the Big 12 it's a tough conference to figure out, man. So it's a really interesting dynamic with it being expanded. I can't get a good handle on it. So, and I think this game will help determine a lot of it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Arizona State looks like a team that'll make a bowl, and especially with how poor they were last year, this is a great accomplishment for them. They have a great running back in Cam Scatterbo. And but really, I think the reason they didn't get an AP vote last week is because I think people are definitely off the Kansas bandwagon after the past 2 years. Kansas is really struggling. And they found a way to beat them. Arizona State found a way to win. They found a way to beat them, but it wasn't really as decisive as it should have been, given Kansas's record. But this definitely is a measuring stick game for them against Utah. I'm not sure if Cam Rising's going to play. Let's hope he does. But if not, it's just more growth for Isaac Wilson, who has been up and down, but you expect that from a young quarterback with the pressure.
So I
Excuse
want to
me.
get your opinion on this real quick. Just on Arizona State. I
Yeah.
have an analogy that I think it's good, but I want to see if you agree. I think Kenny Dillingham is the Shane Beamer of the Big 12. Is that seem accurate to you? I just because sometimes he'll win the big ones that you don't expect it. Sometimes he'll drop the ones that you think they are. Very fun coach, very player oriented, very vocal. I don't know. That's my opinion, but I could be wrong. I don't follow Arizona State very closely, so I could have not a good handle of my impression of Kenny Dillingham.
Yeah, and I don't really follow Shane Bieber that much, being like anti-SEC, but I think it's too soon. I think it's too soon. The jury's still out for that type of judgment, really, because I want to say it's either his second or third year, and they haven't really had like many big wins. Like this year, they're starting to emerge and be a contender in their conference. But I just think the jury's still out, really, for that type of judgment.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yes, I realize I shouldn't ask you many things related to the Southeastern Conference. I'm not gonna get a great answer probably.
Yeah, you know me too well. I mean,
Yeah.
there's already enough people covering the SEC. What's my voice gonna do with that Goliath of a conference? For my game of the week, I'm gonna go with a double header on ESPN2, also on Friday, and this is just a significant opportunity for all four teams involved in this doubleheader. Starting off, we got Ivy League Friday night. We got Cornell versus Harvard, and there is one in particular that the country should be watching. That is one Jamison Wong, who has honestly seems like he's been at Cornell forever. I remember watching this freshman year 3 years ago when I lived in Georgia during the 2021 season. But he dazzled this year against Yale earlier this year, I should say, with 278 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, and 58 yards on the ground, and another touchdown in just a 47-23 blowout of the Yale Bulldogs. Cornell has kind of been up and down, so maybe the Yale game was a bit of a flash in the pan moment. They can disprove that with the win against Harvard, which they've come close the past couple of years. Jamison Wong has 6,533 career yards of total offense. He averaged 288 yards per game last year. His style of play reminds me of another great Ivy League quarterback in recent memory, EJ Perry, who has been getting NFL contracts over the past couple of years, was a starter on the Michigan Panthers before he got injured. But Jamison Wong, with his 6,535 career yards of total offense, he is third all time in total offense, and he is third all time in touchdowns responsible. He just passed Ed Marinero in both ranks, Ed Marinero being the runner-up in the 1971 Heisman for Cornell. So he is third in those totals in school history. And this is a showcase game for him. Like honestly, I think Jameson Wong's potential to be in the East West Shrine Bowl. Really, I mean, I really think that this is a late round or undrafted free agent prospect at quarterback we're looking at here. Harvard, Harvard's going to have strong defense. They're going to run the ball well. This year, Jacob Syke is leading the charge on defense. Of course, Thor Griffin comes to mind, the player that transferred to FBS, being transferred to a Power Five school, sorry, a Power Four school last year. But Jacob Syke so far has 4 tackles for loss. He's a solid edge rush prospect at 235 pounds. And following that game on ESPN2, you have Arkansas Pine Bluff and Prairie View. And Arkansas Pine Bluff, they have one of the best pass catching tandems in the country. You got Makai Hagans, who's averaging 245 yards per game passing with 10 touchdowns, throwing to Giovanni Gibson, who has, get this, Jackson, 22 catches for 575 yards and 5 touchdowns so far this season, including 7 catches for 180 yards and 3 touchdowns against Alcorn State last week. On defense, hoping to stop him is Prairie View A&M's Fred Stokes Jr., who has 6.5 tackles for a loss. And Prairie View's been struggling a bit on offense, but I really think both games are going to be exciting. You're going to see some great talent in these games, and it's a great opportunity too, especially with I'd hate to mention it, but Memphis, South Florida being pushed to Saturday from Friday to Saturday due to Hurricane Milton. I want to lift up prayers to all involved and God's mercy on all involved. But the slate is really limited. I really think much of the country is going to get bored with Northwestern Maryland, especially if that one ends up being like a blowout. And the ESPN2 slot, the bump from ESPN2 from ESPNU to ESPN2 actually helps. Like last year, Cornell Harvard got 153,000 viewers on a Friday night on ESPN2, which is just amazing numbers for an FCS game. That's not one of the Dakota schools. That's not a Big Sky school. So great doubleheader, a great introduction to FCS football for a lot of the country in Cornell Harvard and Arkansas Pine Bluff Prairie View.
So if you haven't figured it out, you should be watching college football Friday night because we've got already been talked about 3 great games. So no, I'm excited for all of the weekend's matchups, but Friday night is particularly fun. It's the calm before our like Christmas Eve, man. Every week it's fantastic. So for my next game of the week to watch, I'm gonna go with Louisville at Virginia. Virginia lost their best player in 2023 in Malik Washington to the draft, and they have surpassed their win total already from last year somehow. Now there's nothing great about Virginia. They don't have a star quarterback. Their leading receiver only has 3 touchdowns on the year. They don't even have a 300-yard running back, but they're put together well. Last week against Boston College, they scored 24 unanswered points. They squeaked by Wake Forest. They're not winning these games pretty, but they're finding a way to win them, which is not something they did last year. Now, on the other hand, Louisville just got beat by SMU. That was the best game in the noon hour, like I already said, in my opinion, on any type of network or streaming. So that was the one I was watching at least. And man, for the majority of the time, Louisville just looked like the better football team, and SMU found a way to beat them. There were pockets of the game where they gained momentum. But it was not overall a cohesive performance, at least. It wasn't put together. Again, it's mid-October as we talked about. So I think this game will answer a lot of questions about both teams. I'm leaning towards Louisville walking out of Scott Stadium with a win just because, it's been overwhelming, because nothing has been overwhelming with Virginia, I should say. That said, Virginia was a 3-9 team last year. I'll give them some slack for not managing to look pretty while being 4-1, but still being 4-1. So.
Yeah, and I think with the ACC, just like the Big 12, it's really sick. I mean, not even sick league, but there's just so much parity that Louisville, for instance, lost to Notre Dame like last week and they lost to SMU, but they very well could upset Miami next week, right? And Virginia, again, like Arizona State, Virginia's 4-1. Boston College kind of I mean, did what Boston College does with they have a strong start, then they'll slip up a couple times here and there. This is again like a measuring stick for Arizona State. The Utah game was. This is a measuring stick game for Virginia in beating Louisville because Louisville's offense. We talked about the past couple weeks about Tyler Shuff just bringing a new dimension, a new big playability to that offense, and it's a different Louisville team this year. So I'm interested to see that that Virginia is taking that next step. And honestly, they need a game like this or two to make hit bowl eligibility because they have a tough slate in the ACC going forward, where they have a lot of teams that I mean I think that will finish out better than them in the conference to beat just to reach a bowl game. But this is a great game for Virginia to get on that bowl trajectory and prove themselves in the ACC.
Absolutely. Yeah, the ACC is it's a tough conference and not at all how we thought it played out, right? If you had told us, I mean, I won't even get into Florida State and Cal in the ACC. But yeah, it's not really gone as planned. Miami, dude, Miami looks like legit. I get a little bit more convinced about them more and more each week. But anyways, what's up? What's your next game of the week to watch?
So for my next game of the week to watch, I have the only college football game on Sunday. We have Wabash versus Oberlin, Division 3 action at 12 o'clock Eastern on Oberlin's website. And it's just great to see. I mean, I'm not gonna be an idiot and say that two Division 3 schools are gonna outdraw the early afternoon slate of NFL football, but it's great to see for the diehard college football fans that there is college football in two tradition-rich programs. Wabash, of course, they play for one of the oldest rivalries in college football, the Manon Bell game, which has been around since 1884. They play for that against DePaul every year at the end of the year in Indiana. And then Oberlin College has their place in college history. John Heisman coached there. They are the last Ohio college to beat Ohio State to this day. Many MAC teams have tried, but they have not been able to dethrone Oberlin from that honor. Oberlin's kind of struggled though. They're a bit different than that team that beat Ohio State way back in the day. I think it's like the early 1900s. Oberlin struggling this year. They're getting outscored 50-2 in games. They have 12 total points in 5 games. Hunter Green, though, is a bright spot on defense with 43 tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, and an interception for the Yeoman, one of the best nicknames in college football. He definitely deserves some all-star game consideration, whether it be in the smaller games like the FCS Bowl or the Tropic Bowl, but he definitely deserves consideration for an all-star game. I mean, Oberlin, that defense will have their hands full against Xavier Tyler and the Wabash Little Giants, another great college football nickname. Tyler had 185 yards on 15 carries last week against Worcester, and this year he has 469 yards on the year for the Little Giants. So if Saturday night slate, if Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday slate was not enough for you, there's still Sunday afternoon football for you and two tradition-rich programs. So I urge you just to learn about these programs and just put aside the NFL action and just watch this Division 3 game.
I did not even realize there was a game on Sunday. So props to you for finding it and talking about it. Is there a website that we have to subscribe to? That sounds like a free game to watch, right? So
Yeah,
why
it
not?
is free. It
There you
is
go.
free.
Why not prop it up on the laptop? Maybe you have Red Zone on the big TV and throw that on your laptop, something, right? So keep up with some D3 football. But for my last game of the week to watch, I'm gonna go with Idaho at Montana State. Forgive me because I know this is the FCS equivalent of talking Oregon, Ohio State. But this is gonna be a great game, man. On national TV, like you said, on ESPN. And what's a weaker FBS late night window? It's Montana State's first time being 6-0 since 2012. Last year, this was a great game. Idaho won 24-21. There were three lead changes in the fourth quarter. So if you can stay up late, this is definitely going to be worth it. I've said the name all year. Keyshawn James Newby, the edge rusher for Idaho. He's going to be a name to watch that night. He's tied for the second most sacks in the FCS. He got 2 sacks on the road at Oregon. Gonna be a difference maker in this game, especially if Idaho pulls out with the win.
Yeah, and I know a lot of eyes will be on this one because the Big Sky has done nothing but impress in the last 3 years of their TV contract with these late night games. Idaho, of course, coming off a loss this past week. Montana State, though, just a tough environment to play in. And just a great game in general for the league. And honestly, like this game won't it will have playoff implications, but not in the way where a team's eliminated, but in the way where a team could potentially get a seed or not based off this game. And for those of you that don't know with FCS playoffs, where seeds work, seeds get 8 teams get seeds in the 2014 field. They get a first round bye and they get to host, and they get home field advantage unless they play a higher seed team. So seeds are everything in the playoffs. With of course, unlike the 12-team college football playoff, every single game but the championship is on a campus site. So just a huge game for these implications. And Idaho's definitely kind of showed some decline with Giovanni McCoy's transfer to Oregon State. So I'm excited to see who comes out on top for that one. Of course, that's definitely the appetizer for the Brawl of the Wild because everyone loves the Brawl of the Wild, Montana versus Montana State. That's definitely the game of the year each year in the Big Sky. But this, of course, is a great appetizer.
Yeah, Brawl of the Wild is one of the best rivalries out there in college football, regardless of level. So, but no, this is definitely going to be. There's some sneaky good rivalries in the Big Sky. So,
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely. And then for I just have one more brief game of the week, really. Going back to the Ivy League, Brown versus Rhode Island, the battle for the Governor's Cup. And of course, everyone loves their old sitcoms on MeTV. I'm just so fascinated because I found out this game is being broadcasted on MeTV in Rhode Island, the channel that airs classics such as Green Acres, Bonanza, the Twilight Zone, Perry Mason, the Carol Burnett Show, all these old 1960 shows, and then bam, you get Coastal Athletic Association football because Rhode Island has a deal with their local Me TV station. But although the shows on there might be a joke, right? The old 1960 shows, the two offenses are Jake Wilcox is following the footsteps of EJ Perry. He's slinging the ball around the yard, almost averaging 300 yards per game for the Brown Bears. And then Malik Grant, I'm surprised this guy is still in college, to be honest with you, in his 6 year of eligibility. He was a replacement, or not the replacement. Yeah, he was the successor to Julius Chestnut at Sacred Heart, and he's having a great year this year as well. Had 180 yards in the epic in Armstrong against Hampton this past week, and he made the Shrine Bowl 1000. So, cozy up, watch some Carol Burnett, Hogan's Heroes if you're in the Providence area, and then tune in for that one. Adjust your antenna and tune in for Rhode Island versus Brown.
yeah, man, there's a ton of good games to watch. I know October 12th was like originally the date that everyone was talking about, and you saw the memes about like not going to any weddings on October 12th, and October 19th is like slowly taken over as that new date that's just like we have some amazing matchups. But don't forget, man, we've got a ton of great games this week. We're really getting into the meat of the season where we're gonna see a lot of things determined. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm excited to see. We didn't even mention any of the big ticket games that everyone's mentioning. I guess that's just what we do
yeah,
so well on this podcast.
yeah, absolutely. There's other places to find that. Tune in to College Game Day on Saturday morning. They'll talk about all the big games going on, and we'll pay attention to some of these other ones, the Idaho, Montana states of the weekend. So, Omar, anything else you want to add before we hop off?
No, I don't have anything else to add. Do you have anything, Jackson?
I don't think so, man. Just can't wait for this. We've got Tuesday and Wednesday night football now, which will always be fun. So that's it for me.
Yeah, that's it for me too. And until next time, everyone, thanks for listening and or watching. Until next time, peace, love, and soul on the Burger Popper.